My name is Julia Warren, and I am 33 years old. I run a modest interior design business in Portland and raise my daughter Lily as a single mom. Most days, life feels like a quiet uphill climb, steady, predictable, and sometimes lonely. But nothing prepared me for the night. Everything cracked open with one sentence from my child. It happened during what was supposed to be a cheerful evening, a family celebration thrown by my older sister Samantha in honor of our mother's birthday. The party was held at Samantha's new house, a sprawling modern place filled with marble counters and oversized glass chandeliers, the kind of place that whispers money in every polished corner. I had arrived with Lily just an hour earlier, wearing my best black dress and a hopeful smile. My mother, Diane, welcomed us with exaggerated warmth, a noticeable shift from her usual cold civility. That should have been my first warning sign. Samantha played hostess like she was born for it, floating from one guest to another with a practiced laugh and glass of champagne always in hand. I was just beginning to relax, sipping from my wine glass and chatting with an acquaintance near the buffet when Lily approached. She was pale. Her eyes, usually bright and playful, were wide with urgency. "Mom," she whispered, tugging on my arm. "You need to leave now, please. Just go. Trust me." For a second, I thought she might be sick, or perhaps overwhelmed by the crowd. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, bending to her level. She shook her head, her grip tightening. "Please, Mom, I can't explain right now. But you can't stay here. You need to trust me." Her voice trembled, but held a strange steadiness. I glanced around. My mother was laughing a little too loudly with Samantha near the bar. Everything seemed normal, but in that moment, something in my gut twisted. My daughter had never looked at me like that before. Never. "Okay," I said slowly. "Let's go." I set down my glass and stood up. No one noticed as we slipped quietly toward the entrance. As we reached the front door, Samantha's voice called out, "Julia, you're not leaving already, are you?" I turned my hand on the doorknob and offered a polite smile. "Lily's not feeling great. We'll head out and let you enjoy the evening." Diane appeared behind her, frowning. "You just got here." "I'll call tomorrow," I replied, and we stepped outside into the night. My heels clicked against the walkway as we made our way to the car. Lily didn't speak until we were buckled in and driving away. I watched her through the rearview mirror. She looked shaken. I had no idea yet what she had seen or heard, but I trusted her. And that decision saved me, because what they had planned for me that night was not a celebration. It was a carefully staged trap. Back home after Lily had gone to bed, I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, letting the silence stretch around me. The question repeated over and over in my mind like a heartbeat. What had they been planning? It wasn't like Samantha or Diane to act warm without reason, especially not toward me. I had always been the outsider in my own family. Growing up, Samantha was the golden child, brilliant, poised, always knowing what to say. She followed the traditional path, top law school, prestigious firm, marrying a wealthy partner, hosting charity events with white wine and curated guest lists. I, on the other hand, chose something less conventional. I studied design, started freelancing after college, and married young a man who eventually walked away when parenting proved too heavy for him. Since then, it had just been me and Lily, a small apartment, a second-hand SUV, and the hustle of building my business client by client. My mother, Diane, never quite forgave me for not being Samantha. At family dinners, she made veiled remarks about how I had so much potential if only you were more like your sister. When I designed the interiors of Samantha's law office 3 years ago for free, mind you, there wasn't even a thank you card. It wasn't resentment I carried. It was a quiet ache, the kind you learn to live with it. Until tonight. Something had shifted. Their sudden warmth had felt rehearsed, coordinated. Samantha kept refilling my glass without asking. Mom kept insisting we all toast again and again, pushing the wine like it was water. That wasn't care. That was strategy. And it hadn't just started tonight. In the past 2 weeks, both of them had contacted me more than usual. Samantha had reached out about a new opportunity and wanted to discuss an investment plan. I brushed it off, thinking it was just one of her usual ventures. Then there was the strange email I received from a lawyer I didn't know. A vague document marked review and sign with language about a family asset consolidation. I had planned to ask about it tonight. Now I was glad I hadn't. Something deeper was moving under the surface, and Lily, my bright observant Lily, had seen it before I did. I thought back to the night, to the look in Diane's eyes when I said we were leaving. It wasn't worry. It was annoyance, like a director watching an actor miss her cue. Samantha's voice, light and casual, had been just a shade too smooth, and the way they had exchanged glances when I picked up my purse, that was not concern. That was panic. I turned on my laptop and opened the vague legal document again. It was cleverly worded, but as I read more closely, one section jumped out. It referred to voluntary reallocation of inheritance rights for the preservation of family wealth. My jaw clenched. The document was essentially a waiver, a transfer of any claim I had to my grandparents' old property portfolio to a holding company. A company managed by Samantha and signed under the guise of family restructuring. My name was on it. A blank signature line waited. The trap had been set. All they needed was my trust and a few glasses of wine. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. It wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal engineered by people who had spent years convincing me I wasn't worth protecting. They had never expected me to fight back. They had counted on me still needing their approval. But they had forgotten something. I may not have had their money, their law degrees, or their smug entitlement, but I had something they underestimated: my daughter. And now, I had a reason to fight. The next morning I woke up early, still raw from the revelations of the night before. Lily was already in the kitchen, quiet but alert, pouring cereal into her bowl with more care than usual. I sat down beside her and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "I need to know what happened. Last night, why did you ask me to leave?" She didn't speak immediately. She stared into her bowl, then finally looked up, her voice steady but low. "I went upstairs to find the bathroom," she began, "but the hallway was dark and I heard voices coming from one of the rooms. It was Aunt Samantha and someone else, a man. They were talking about you." My heart skipped. What did they say? She swallowed hard. "They said they hoped you'd had enough wine by now." The man, he had a folder. "Samantha said you'd sign anything when you were buzzed." He laughed and said the paperwork was ready in the guest room just in case. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Lily continued. "Then I heard Grandma come in. She said it was best to get it done tonight, that it was better for the family if you didn't get involved in the real estate stuff anymore." Real estate stuff. Of course. The properties our grandparents left behind, 3 small buildings downtown, still generating income held in trust until both sisters turned 35. I hadn't thought about them in years, assuming the trust remained untouched. I was wrong. "Did you see what was in the folder?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "No. But I heard the man say the documents needed your signature to complete the ownership transfer." My stomach twisted. They had planned to corner me, get me drunk enough to sign something I didn't understand, and walk away with everything. I stood and walked to the living room. My bag still sat by the door. I pulled out my phone and searched through my email. Buried between newsletters and client notes, there it was, a follow-up from the law office. Attached was a PDF labeled Family Asset Agreement, Draft. I opened it. The language was dense but clear enough if you knew what to look for. Clause by clause, it transferred ownership of the properties to a holding company, Wellspring Capital LLC, a name I didn't recognize. I Googled it. Registered 2 months ago. Managing partner Samantha C. Warren. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My mother and sister had set me up to legally walk away from my birthright, and if Lily hadn't warned me, I might have done it. I called my accountant, asking him to go through any public changes in the trust related to my grandparents' estate. He promised to get back to me within the day. Then I dialed someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, my former professor from design school, now working in estate advisory. She answered with warmth and curiosity. When I explained the situation, her tone shifted. "This sounds like coercion," she said. "If they tried to get you to sign under the influence, and with intent to transfer ownership without full clarity, it borders on fraud." I thanked her and hung up, head spinning. I looked out the window. The sun was bright, but nothing felt clear. I wasn't ready to confront Samantha or my mother yet. I needed more, harder proof. and someone who could stand beside me when I did. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Martha, our elderly neighbor who'd known me since childhood. It read, "Morning, Julia. Just checking in. I saw your mom and sister outside your house earlier this week. Odd time to be visiting nearly midnight. Everything okay?" I froze. Midnight. What had they been doing here? I called her. Martha answered on the second ring. "Hi, dear," she said kindly. "You know I sit on my porch in the evenings. That night Tuesday, I think I saw Diane and Samantha outside your garage. They were talking quietly and seemed to be checking around the side door. Did they go inside? I don't think so. But they looked nervous. I wasn't sure if I should tell you, but then I heard about the party and—" Her voice trailed off. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means more than you know." When I hung up, my hands trembled. They had come to my home, maybe to look for documents, maybe to plant something. Whatever their purpose, it wasn't innocent. They were determined. But now I had Lily's testimony. I had the suspicious contract. I had Martha's account. I was building a wall of truth around me. And soon they'd realize they should have never underestimated the daughter they cast aside. By midday, my inbox pinged with a message from my accountant, Evan. I opened it with trembling hands. His message was direct. "Julia, you were right to be suspicious. There was an attempt to move the Warren Trust assets into a corporate entity 2 weeks ago. The transfer has not yet completed because your signature is missing, thankfully. But your sister filed initial paperwork with a private firm in Oregon City. That company, Wellspring Capital, is entirely controlled by her. I've attached copies of the filing and registry." My chest tightened as I scrolled through the attachments. There it was. My sister had legally maneuvered everything to the edge of success. All she needed was my uninformed agreement, preferably under the influence. And she would have had it if not for Lily. I stared at the ceiling of my living room for a long moment. The betrayal wasn't shocking anymore. It was sobering. It was strategic. They had engineered the perfect trap. But the flaw in their plan was that they assumed I was still the version of me they remembered, meek, eager to please, uncertain of my place. They forgot that I'd spent the last decade raising a child alone, surviving heartbreak, rebuilding my business from the ground up, and learning to protect what little was mine. They hadn't counted on resilience. I called Lily into the room. She looked up nervously. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said, kneeling down. "But I need your help again. I need you to tell me exactly what you heard that night. Every word you remember." She nodded. Her recollection was surprisingly clear. Samantha had said something like, "Once she signs she's out for good, she'll have no claim." The man had laughed and said, "This is why I love working with attorneys. You know how to bury things in paper." Grandma had said, "She's too soft to make trouble. She's always been the kind to avoid conflict. That's why this will work." I jotted it all down word for word as best as Lily remembered. I recorded her recounting it in audio timestamped stored in 3 backups. I wasn't going to lose this battle because of missing documentation. I made 2 decisions that day. The first, I called my own attorney, a woman named Rachel I had worked with briefly during my divorce. She had a sharp mind and zero tolerance for injustice. The second, I began assembling everything I needed to confront my family on my terms in my space, with the truth behind me. Rachel listened carefully to my summary and whistled under her breath. "This is textbook manipulation," she said. "And if you'd signed anything under the influence, we'd be looking at a long, ugly civil case. But since you didn't and we have intent, we're in a stronger position." I asked her what our options were. She said, "Well, you could confront them. Or we could file a cease and desist letter with the state registry, block all actions under that holding company, and submit formal notice of potential fraud." I'd advise doing both. That night, I stayed up organizing my files. I made copies of every message screenshot, every odd interaction, highlighted the most revealing sentences in the legal draft. Then I began drafting my own letter. It wasn't legal jargon, it was personal. It was my voice. It opened like this. "To my mother and sister, I know what you tried to do. I know about Wellspring Capital. I know about the paperwork and the plan to trap me at your party. I know you saw me as a loose end, an inconvenience, a signature away from being erased. But I am not the girl you used to silence. I am the woman you didn't expect to stand up. And now I'm standing. I printed it, folded it, sealed it in an envelope. The next morning, I sent it via courier to Samantha's law office and another to my mother's townhouse. I also instructed Rachel to begin filing a notice of dispute with the Oregon Trust Registry and a temporary freeze on the transfer of the estate. I would give them one chance to face me honestly, and that chance was coming in 2 days because I was going to invite them both to coffee. One table, one confrontation, no more pretending, no more silence. They had made the mistake of trying to manipulate me in the dark. I was going to answer them in broad daylight. 2 days later, I walked into the quiet little cafe downtown just before noon, choosing the corner table near the window where sunlight spilled in over the wooden tabletop. I'd called the meeting myself. One message to Samantha. I'd like to talk just the three of us. You, me, and Mom. Nothing dramatic, just coffee. My treat. She replied within 5 minutes. Of course, let's clear the air. That was her style. Polished cordial, always hiding the blade until the last second. My mother, Diane, said nothing but showed up on time, wrapped in her usual beige trench coat like armor. Samantha arrived just behind her, tailored and smiling like she was walking into a deposition she expected to win. I stood to greet them. Thanks for coming, I said. They sat across from me, and for a few moments we all stared at our menus like we didn't know what to say. Samantha was the first to speak. Julia, I'm really sorry about the other night. You left so abruptly. We were worried. Were you? I asked, keeping my voice even. Or were you more worried I wouldn't sign something you and your associate had tucked away upstairs? Her smile faltered. Diane frowned. What are you talking about? I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I placed it gently on the table. Let's skip the part where we pretend. I know about Wellspring Capital. I know about the draft you sent to that fake law office. I know about the signatures you were hoping I'd scribble after 3 glasses of wine. And I know about the conversation you had upstairs, Samantha. Lily heard every word. A pause. The kind of pause that lands like a stone in water. Then Samantha leaned back and scoffed. Julia, this is absurd. Is it? I opened the folder and slid the papers toward them. Emails highlighted contract clauses, even the company registration showing Samantha's name. Diane glanced at it, her face tightening. Where did you get this? She whispered. From my accountant. From the trust registry. From our neighbor Martha, who saw you both skulking around my house at midnight last week. Take your pick. Samantha's tone turned icy. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just a restructuring. Something simple to protect the family's interests. No, I said, staring at her. It was an ambush. One you orchestrated. And Mom, you backed it. Diane finally spoke, her voice clipped. You never wanted to be involved in the family's business affairs. You've always acted like you were above it. You thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't question it, that I'd just sign whatever you handed me like a fool. That's what you really thought. I could see it then, the guilt flickering behind Samantha's eyes, the defensiveness stiffening my mother's spine. For years, I'd begged for their respect, tried to earn it. Now I saw how little they thought of me. I've filed a formal dispute with the trust registry, I said quietly. And legal counsel is involved. Any attempt to finalize that transfer will be frozen. If either of you attempt to pursue it further, you'll be facing legal consequences. Samantha's mask finally cracked. You're threatening us. I'm protecting myself, I said. And the legacy our grandparents left not just to you, but to me too. Diane looked away, staring out the window with a blank expression. You're making this uglier than it needs to be, she muttered. No, I said, gathering the papers back into my folder. You made it ugly the moment you decided your own daughter and sister didn't deserve honesty. You wanted to erase me from the equation. But you forgot something important. What? Samantha asked coldly. I stood taking my bag. That I'm not alone. And that I have a daughter who sees the truth when I can't. I left them sitting there speechless in the golden light of a perfect spring afternoon. Let them sit with the weight of what they had done. Let them stew in the unraveling of their perfect plan. I had entered the cafe expecting confrontation, But what I got was confirmation that I was never going to be the version of myself they preferred. And that was fine, because the version I had become was finally enough to protect everything that mattered. That evening, after the cafe meeting, I walked into my apartment with a strange mix of calm and fire in my chest. Lily was on the couch working on her math homework earbuds, oblivious to the quiet war her mother had just declared, and won in a single afternoon. I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "You saved me." She looked up confused, but I just smiled and went into my bedroom to change. Then I sat down at my desk and began the next phase. It wasn't enough to stop the transfer. That was just containment. I needed to ensure it never happened again, not to me, not to anyone else they thought they could manipulate. My lawyer Rachel had already submitted the formal freeze to the Oregon Trust Registry. That would halt all paperwork connected to Wellspring Capital until further review. But I wanted more than a pause. I wanted a reckoning. So I spent the night drafting a second letter, this one not addressed to my mother or sister, but to the Ethics Board of the Oregon State Bar. I documented what Samantha had done, the shell company, the timing of the party, the intent to have me sign while under the influence, and the pre-arranged presence of a lawyer to witness it all. I attached copies of the document's timelines and a notarized statement from Martha. I didn't do this out of vengeance. I did it out of necessity. People like Samantha wore professionalism like armor. They weaponized their credentials, assuming no one would dare hold them accountable. But being family did not give them immunity from consequence, especially not when the damage could have lasted generations. By midnight, the packet was finished. The next morning, I mailed it by courier. Rachel reviewed everything and said, "This will land like a grenade. Be ready." I was. That same day, I received an email from Evan, my accountant, confirming that the freeze had been accepted. No documents under my name or stake in the Warren Trust could be legally transferred until the matter was reviewed by a court. I closed my laptop, sat back, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without the weight of being stalked by unseen betrayal. But I wasn't done. I began reaching out to people quietly, strategically. A real estate analyst I knew through a former client, an estate lawyer who once worked on the same portfolio years ago, a retired accountant who had audited Diane's investments. I didn't feed them everything, just enough to raise the right eyebrows. I wasn't gossiping. I was building a firewall. If Samantha or Diane tried to twist the narrative, the people around them would already know the truth. Within days, word began to circle through the community that something had gone wrong between the Warren sisters. I didn't chase it. I didn't correct or confirm. I just let the silence hang where explanation used to be. The power of restraint I was learning was greater than any speech I could give. One evening, Lily and I were baking brownies when my phone lit up with an incoming call. "Rachel, it's starting," she said without preamble. "The Ethics Board has acknowledged your complaint. They're opening an inquiry into Samantha's conduct, and you'll likely be asked to give a statement. Will I need to testify?" I asked, my fingers sticky with flour. "Possibly, but only if it escalates. For now, they'll review the evidence. Her license could be suspended. Worst case, revoked." I exhaled. "Good. You okay?" Rachel asked. I looked at Lily, who had licked half the brownie batter from the spoon and now wore a chocolate mustache. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." That night as Lily slept, I lay in bed remembering how many years I spent trying to shrink myself to fit their expectations. How often I questioned my own value just because they never saw it. I had fought hard to build a life on my terms, and now I had defended it successfully. But more than that, I had defended my daughter's faith in me. She had pulled me out of the fire with nothing but her intuition and courage. The trap had been complex, elegant, dressed in wine glasses and chandelier lighting. But what they didn't understand was that some of us are built in the dark. We see things others miss. And when the moment comes, we don't flinch. We protect what's ours. We fight with our minds and walk away clean. And I had done exactly that. A week passed without a word from Samantha or my mother. Not a call, not a message, not even the silent aggression of a passive-aggressive email. I knew better than to interpret the silence as peace. It was the stillness before the next move, and sure enough, it came on a Thursday afternoon in the form of an official envelope left at my door. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. Inside was a notice from Samantha's law office, carefully worded, filled with legal posturing, but unmistakably a threat. It claimed defamation. It accused me of spreading false and damaging claims to third parties regarding private family affairs. It warned of potential civil action should I continue to interfere with professional relationships or reputation. I smiled. Not because it didn't scare me, it did, but because it confirmed what I already knew. My actions had struck a nerve. The illusion of control Samantha had always maintained was cracking. I forwarded the letter to Rachel, who called within the hour. "Empty threat," she said. "Typical attempt to intimidate. Do not respond. I've already filed a counter notification with the bar. If she wants a legal battle, she'll lose more than her pride." Still, something inside me stirred. Not fear, not exactly, but anger. Not the hot kind that burns impulsively, but the cold kind that sharpens with time. The kind that doesn't just want survival, it wants truth. The next day, I made one more move. I contacted a local journalist, someone I'd met years ago, when I helped stage a property for a public housing article. I told her there was a story, one involving family betrayal, legal manipulation, and a licensed attorney attempting to coerce her sister into signing away property rights while intoxicated. I said I had documents, timestamps, and voices willing to speak off the record. I never mentioned names, not yet, but I saw the spark of curiosity ignite in her voice. "Can I see the files?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied, "but soon. I just want you to be ready when the fallout comes." I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability, and I wanted the narrative to be mine, not theirs. That weekend, Lily and I spent the afternoon at the coast. We picked shells, ate greasy fries, and laughed like we hadn't in months. I watched her skip along the shoreline light on her feet, free of the weight that had nearly crushed us both. When we returned home, there was a small package waiting at our door. No note, just a simple box. I opened it slowly and found a photo frame inside. A childhood picture of Samantha and me smiling at a summer lake house long gone. Taped to the back was a sticky note written in my mother's handwriting. "We were happy once." "Why did you have to destroy that?" I read the note 3 times, then dropped it in the trash. They were never truly happy with me. They were happy when I was silent, when I served their narrative, when I smiled through their insults. And now that I had rewritten the script, they mourned a version of me that no longer existed. But that wasn't my burden to carry. I tucked the photo into a drawer, not to honor the past, but to remind myself of how far I had come. They had tried to silence me with charm, guilt, and manipulation. I answered with facts, resilience, and the voice of a daughter brave enough to speak up when no one else would. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about dignity. And they would never take that from me again. The formal hearing with the state bar was scheduled for mid-May, and while it wasn't a trial in the traditional sense, it carried weight. Rachel prepared me for what to expect: review panels, document verification statements from third parties. Samantha would be present, her license, her professional standing, her carefully constructed image all hung in the balance. I wasn't required to attend, but I chose to. Not for vengeance, but to be in the room when truth met consequence. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed simply in navy and gray, tied my hair back, and wore flats. Not to impress, just to be grounded. Rachel met me in the lobby of the administrative office and handed me a slim folder. Inside were copies of every piece of documentation we'd submitted: the contract draft, the email with the request to sign under vague pretenses, the timeline for Martha Lily's audio recording transcribed. We sat side by side in the waiting area. At exactly 900, the door opened and Samantha stepped in. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, heels, and her courtroom smile. But her eyes had lost their certainty. When she saw me, she paused, barely nodding. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The hearing itself lasted under 2 hours. Samantha's lawyer tried to frame the issue as a misunderstanding between siblings, citing familial tension and a well-intended but poorly executed estate planning attempt. But the panel wasn't easily swayed. They read through the highlighted phrases in the contract, the timestamps that matched the night of the party. The messages she had sent to her legal assistant referring to getting Julia to sign when she's relaxed. Rachel's voice was calm, methodical, never dramatic. She didn't have to be. The truth did the heavy lifting. When they asked if I had anything to say, I stood and kept it simple. I was not approached as a sister. I was approached as a target. The goal was not to unify our family. It was to erase my share in something that was rightfully mine. And the plan was deliberate, premeditated, and deeply unethical. I sat down. The room remained quiet. One of the panel members asked Samantha directly, "Did you at any point believe your sister would knowingly and willingly sign this contract after 3 glasses of wine surrounded by party guests without legal counsel?" Samantha hesitated for the first time. I didn't think she'd oppose it. That wasn't the question the panelist replied. Samantha's mouth opened, then closed. No answer. The ruling wasn't immediate, but we knew what direction it was going. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "She won't lose her license today, but it's headed that way. They'll suspend her. Maybe more after review." That was enough. As we exited the building, the sky opened into soft rain. I felt it on my face, cool and clean. Rachel patted my back. "You handled it with grace." I wasn't fighting her, I said. I was fighting the version of me she thought still existed. That evening, I told Lily everything. I sat her down on the couch and explained what happened at the hearing, what it meant, and why it mattered. She listened carefully, her face serious, in a way that reminded me she was growing up faster than I realized. When I finished, she asked, "Are we safe now?" I nodded. "Yes, we're safe." She thought for a moment, then leaned against me. "Good, because I don't ever want you to feel scared like that again." I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Because of you, I didn't." Outside, the rain continued into the night, washing away the weight of a long fight. I curled up beside my daughter and watched the water streak down the windows like a curtain falling on the final act of a play I never wanted to be part of. They had written a script without me. I had torn it up and rewritten it in my voice. And the ending? It belonged to me. Weeks passed. The storm faded. The noise, the tension, the silence from my mother and Samantha. It all became background static, like a distant memory I no longer needed to revisit. One morning, I stood in my studio adjusting fabric swatches for a new client when my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Confirmed license suspended for 18 months, pending further investigation." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the screen, not with triumph, but with a quiet finality. It was over. Not because I had won, but because I had refused to lose. That evening, Lily and I sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. She was reading a book, legs tucked under her, and I was sipping tea, watching her, watching the world. "Mom," she said suddenly, not looking up. "Yeah, do you think people can really change?" I paused, thinking. "Some people," I said. "Some never try. Some change when it's too late, and some only change because someone finally told them no." She nodded slowly, and I saw her lips curve into a faint smile. "I'm glad you said no." "Me too," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. The world didn't feel safer. It felt clearer. I had walked through something dark and tried to be the light instead of letting it consume me. That was enough. That had to be. In the weeks that followed my design, business flourished. Word of mouth from a few new clients, people who appreciated integrity over flash, kept my calendar full. I added small touches to our apartment, not out of need, but pride. I bought a new bookshelf for Lily, a small pendant light for our kitchen, nothing expensive. Everything intentional. One night, she hung a framed drawing on our wall. It was a sketch she'd done of the two of us on the beach, her hand in mine. At the bottom, she had written, "I see you. I trust you. I love you." And I realized after everything, I didn't just protect my name. I protected the one person whose opinion truly mattered. The war had ended not with destruction, but with clarity. And in that quiet, I found peace. It's strange how quickly normalcy returns once the noise dies down. The fear, the anger, the confusion, all those jagged emotions that once kept me awake at night began to feel distant, like echoes from a room I no longer lived in. And yet the lessons remained sharp. They weren't ghosts, they were anchors. I had lunch with an old friend from design school one afternoon, someone who had once seen me at my lowest. She'd heard whispers about Samantha's suspension the hearing, even the trust dispute. "You never struck me as the type to wage war," she said over coffee, her tone not judgmental, just curious. I smiled softly. I didn't go looking for a fight. But when it came to my door, I didn't hide from it either. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You've changed." I had. Not in the loud, dramatic way people announce transformation, but in the quiet rewiring of the self. I no longer apologized for asking questions. I no longer shrank in the presence of power. I no longer mistook manipulation for love. One evening, Lily asked if we could visit the old park we used to go to when she was little. I hadn't been there in years, but something about her request tugged at me. So we packed a small picnic, drove across town, and sat on the same worn wooden bench beneath the willow trees. She laid her head on my shoulder. "Do you think they'll ever say sorry?" she asked. I thought about that. About Diane, who hadn't called since the confrontation. About Samantha, who had gone radio silent after the suspension. Maybe I said, "But we don't need it." Why not? Because we already know the truth, and knowing it set us free. She didn't speak for a while. Just watched the wind tease the grass, watched kids laughing on the swing set, watched the peace that comes from surviving something designed to break you. And then she whispered, "I'm proud of you." I turned to her, stunned for a moment by the weight of those words coming from such a young heart. "I'm proud of you too," I said. "You saw what I couldn't. You acted when I froze. You spoke when no one else would." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She just reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook. She flipped to a page and handed it to me. It was a letter. A real one, written in her careful handwriting. "Dear Mom," it began. "The night I told you to leave, I didn't know if you'd listen. But you did. And that's when I knew you were stronger than they thought. That's when I knew we'd be okay. I hope one day I'm as brave as you." I folded the letter and held it against my chest, overcome by something I couldn't name. Not sadness, not joy, just the kind of gratitude that shakes you into silence. "You already are," I whispered. We stayed at the park until the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long. When we walked back to the car, I felt something shift, not around me, but inside me. A quiet shedding of an old skin, an old story, an old silence. I wasn't just the sister who said no, the daughter who refused to sign the woman who wouldn't be erased. I was something more. I was the mother who listened, the fighter who stayed gentle, the survivor who didn't just survive, she built something stronger from the wreckage. I didn't win by taking them down. I won by standing up. I won by choosing to believe my daughter when no one else would have. I won by writing a new story for us, one where we weren't quiet, weren't invisible, weren't afraid. And maybe they'll never understand what they lost. Maybe they'll never apologize. But that's no longer my responsibility. Mine is to live well. Mine is to show Lily what it means to keep your soul intact in a world that tries to buy it. And every morning I wake up and see her curled up on the couch with a book and a messy ponytail and a heart 10 times stronger than her years, I know I did exactly that. This wasn't just a story about betrayal, it was a story about clarity, about waking up, about refusing to drink from the poisoned cup just because someone hands it to you with a smile. And when Lily graduates one day, when she walks across that stage with fire in her eyes, I'll be there cheering with every breath in my lungs, knowing that none of this was easy, but all of it was worth it. Because when the moment came, I listened, I left, I fought. And in doing so, I became the mother she believed I already was.